She revealed her unbelievable truth. "Drive me home, but where will I sleep tonight?" As the hum of the diner faded behind her, Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart racing with the weight of the world resting squarely on her shoulders. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows through the windshield. Tonight, like many others, she felt as if she were drowning in fatigue. Bills scattered on the kitchen table, each one a reminder of her uphill battle. She stole a glance at Mike, his reassuring presence pulling her from the depths of despair. But it wasn't enough. She turned to him, her throat tightening around the words that spilled out before she could stop herself. "Drive me home, but where will I sleep tonight?" Panic bubbled in her chest, a question that revealed the throbbing, tender spot in her life. Just days ago, her landlord had given her the news that the building was going on the market, and like a candle being blown out, her fragile hopes flickered into darkness. Her mind raced with possibilities of eviction. Her son, Tom, kept oblivious to their unstable reality. As she wrestled with the thoughts of where they might end up, sharp pangs of desperation clawed at her, forcing her to reevaluate everything she thought was solid. Balancing two jobs had become a meticulous dance, but with eviction looming, every step threatened to shatter her precarious rhythm. Silence hung thick in the car as they navigated familiar backroads. It felt suffocating. Mike sighed softly, his easygoing demeanor now seemingly weighted with something profound. "You can talk to me, Sarah. You're not alone." His kindness melted against her anxiety, yet the vulnerability it called for felt draining. The muscular tension in her shoulders tightened as she hesitated, caught between her instinct to protect and her longing for connection. A single flick of trust dared to escape her lips, but deep-seated fears clawed at her heart. How could she burden anyone else with her struggles? Before Sarah could respond, Mike transitioned the conversation onto lighter topics. As they discussed favorite movies and local hangouts, her mind still churned under a heavy cloud of dread. How could she continue to show strength when the ground felt so unstable beneath her? This duality of hope and despair tangled within her, forming a knot that tightened with every mile they traveled, spiraling inward until her breaths came in shallow waves. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as they reached her apartment's worn facade, doubt twisted in her gut. A smile fell into shadows as she thought of Tom, who would wake to find their once comfortable home in uncertainty. She sensed a crack in her emotional armor, a longing to paint their struggles into the world around her. Mike's unwavering faith sparked something in her, but what if she fell short? What if her attempts at art only reflected failure instead of transformation? Internal debates rattled like the loose change in her pocket, escalating to chaos just as despair threatened to drown her once more. With fierce determination shimmering within her, Sarah looked to Mike, seeking his steady gaze for reassurance. In that suffocating moment, she felt the pull of courage, yet dread loomed close, as betrayal lay in wait. Could their newfound connection withstand the turmoil spiraling around her? Trapped between possibility and pain, Sarah stood on the brink of a decision that could ignite a future or plunge her into deeper darkness. She felt as if she were staring into the abyss, ready to either leap into the unknown or retreat to safety. The choice was as heavy as the evening air around her. As the engine purred to a stop, Sarah remained in the car, the weight of indecision pressing down on her like an anchor. The apartment loomed before her, a seemingly unyielding fortress of her everyday struggles, yet it began to feel more like a prison. She diverted her gaze from the facade, the peeling paint and cracked windows whispering their own tales of decay. A surge of determination ignited in her chest, overwhelming the dread that had become too familiar. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly, drawing Mike's attention back to her. The warmth in his eyes seemed to encourage her. It was now or never. "Of course," he replied, a hint of curiosity edging into his tone. "What do you think makes someone brave?" The question sounded hollow in her ears, yet it held a weight she couldn't fully appreciate. Mike furrowed his brow, contemplating. "I think it's about facing what scares you, even when everything feels uncertain." His words resonated, echoing in the caverns of her mind. Struggling to articulate her next thought, she searched for that flicker of bravery within herself. Could she risk being vulnerable? What if your fears are so big that you can't see a way out? "Then it's time to make a plan," he stated, leaning in slightly, his demeanor shifting to one of subtle seriousness. A plan. The concept was daunting but also comforting. "I've never been great at planning. I just react." The truth of her admission felt like a cave-in. Exposing her weaknesses was nerve-wracking, yet there was something about Mike that made her feel safe. "You've been reacting because you had to survive, but maybe now you can take some control." His assertion planted a seed in her mind. Reacting had indeed led her here, to a precipice where no safety net awaited below. What if she could deliberately turn her fears into a roadmap? The thought was both invigorating and paralyzing. "Maybe I should look for a new job," Sarah mused aloud, the idea taking shape. "Something with better hours, or higher pay. I could create a budget, a timeline, even explore cheaper places to live." "Exactly," Mike encouraged, and his enthusiasm began to break through the suffocating fog of self-doubt. "You're taking actionable steps. That's the first part. But what if I still fall short?" The question clawed at her throat, but it came out softer than expected. A breath escaped her before she could rein it back, and she watched uncertainty flicker in Mike's gaze. "Then you adjust and keep moving forward," he replied, unwavering. "We don't always know what's on the other side of fear, but we can't let it dictate our lives." His unshakable belief in her sent ripples of warmth through her, outlining dormant courage she had locked away. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught somewhere deep in her chest as a shadow of impending responsibility loomed over her. It wasn't just about her anymore. There was Tom, always woven into her decisions, needing stability. That urgent, gnawing need weighed against her like a fog. The car's interior felt more like a confessional now, the walls closing in as clarity sparked a question that bubbled beneath her surface. What if this is all too much? What if I try and fail? What if I lose everything? "Falling down doesn't mean you can't stand up again," Mike said, his voice firm but encouraging. Her pulse raced. The juxtaposition of possibility and fear became immobile, a delicate balance swinging heavily in the direction of her dormant aspirations. Perhaps this was the moment to act, but what dominoes might her choices set into motion? "What if I don't just want to survive?" Her voice trembled, breaking the quietude. "What if I want to thrive?" Mike's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of something profound. A reflection of her own spark mirrored back to her, igniting flickers of unexpected empowerment. With the weight of that realization, she knew the journey ahead would not be smooth. Decision-making had never felt so starkly political within her heart. But she also understood that this dawning clarity would command her next steps. It was time to confront her fears, and in doing so perhaps discover something extraordinary within herself. The steel of determination coiled in her belly, and she resolved then it was time to not just look for change, but to carve it out against all odds. Yet as she opened the door to exit the vehicle, a thought flickered in her mind. What if Mike was hiding his own doubts too? Could their paths diverge when the circumstances became real? Tough decisions loomed large, like a distant horizon waiting to be confronted. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to face whatever was next. As Sarah stepped out of the car, the cool air hit her face like a splash of cold water, invigorating her senses. She had crossed an invisible boundary, one that separated her from the life of silent acceptance and uncertainty. With every footfall towards the apartment, the trepidation transformed into something unmistakably potent. This was the threshold of her awakening. Inside, the familiar disarray of her living space surged forth with its typical chaos. dishes piling in the sink, laundry waiting to be folded, and that ever-present layer of dust settling on her coffee table. Yet today, the surroundings no longer felt like remnants of defeat. Instead, they presented themselves as an invitation to reshape her environment, a canvas awaiting her brush. She grabbed a pen and a fraying notebook typically reserved for shopping lists, but today it would serve a new purpose. As she sat on her worn couch, the fabric scratched against her skin, grounding her in this moment of clarity. She wrote goals at the top of the page, allowing the simple word to anchor her thoughts as potential manifested in ink. Consider your options, she whispered to herself, scanning the list of possibilities swirling through her mind. It was exhilarating, yet daunting. The prospect of looking for a new job felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, intrepid, yet terrified of the leap. Her fingers hovered over the paper, pausing in contemplation. What have I always wanted to do? She needed a professional identity that resonated with her more profoundly than just a paycheck. The thought sparked another question, one that ignited a flicker of ambition inside her. What skills do I have? She wrote down a series of her talents: communication, problem-solving, creativity. Each point felt like a stepping stone, leading her toward a more defined self. Suddenly, she found herself writing about aspirations she'd quietly shelved: graphic design, community outreach, and even the thought of freelance writing. Pursuing these passions would mean facing the terrifying unknown, the risk of failure lurking like a shadow. And there, under the dim light, she penned another query, one reflecting the very essence of her transformation. What does thriving look like? The answer began forming through an increasing clarity, her heart racing with excitement. Thriving was about balance. It involved stepping into the unknown but maintaining a safety net. She envisioned setting milestones. Perhaps she could secure part-time work while freelancing to gauge the waters before taking the plunge into her dream career. As the possibilities swirled in her mind, the thought of Tom weighed heavily. How do I ensure his stability while pursuing my dreams? The anxiety returned, tightening her chest. Yet this time, it stemmed from a place of love and responsibility. She jotted down a plan, discussed the upcoming changes with Tom, explore their finances together, and ensure that her ambition didn't come at the cost of his well-being. Determined to approach her son with honesty, Sarah revamped her list, this time drawn toward not just herself but their mutual future, a collaborative vision of success. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was no longer a solitary journey, but one intertwined with the love she had for her child. The more she considered incorporating Tom into her plans, the clearer it became that her personal goal could translate into shared happiness. The fear of failure morphed into a commitment to resilience. Instead of succumbing to worry about the unknown, she would face it head-on, planning and discussing until their future became a shared aspiration rather than a lonely burden. With a coffee cup now cradled between her palms, she pulled out her phone. Tentatively, she began to look for job listings in graphic design, resisting the urge to close the app when self-doubt crept in. She reminded herself she had the skills, and more importantly, she had the desire to make something of herself. The thought made her smile, but just as she felt herself gaining momentum, a notification pinged, an email from her editor. We need to discuss your latest piece. The reminder of her past life, of unfulfilled expectations, hovered ominously over her thoughts, momentarily distracting her from the growth she was nurturing. She took a deep breath, wresting control back as the uncertainty seeped through her determination. Should she ignore it? Dive back into the writing that had brought her both comfort and conflict? Perhaps revisiting that world might just further embolden her new path. As she clicked on the message, a line of tension curled in her stomach. What if the task at hand forced her back into the box of conventionality she wished to escape? Or, could this be the opportunity to redefine her relationship with her past work, filtering it through the lens of her newfound journey? Sarah felt her heart race as she continued to process the possibilities ahead. The weight of her courage intensified. This was truly the moment of truth, and she would face it. The door to her own transformation had swung wide open, but its threshold also faced the shadow of her past. What would happen when she prioritized her growth? But her previous commitments tugged at her like a forgotten burden. The screen illuminated her face as Sarah read her editor's message again, her heart pounding with conflicting emotions. The world of writing had been her sanctuary, but it was also a reminder of the safety net that could no longer be her only solace. She had cultivated the courage to dream, but the ghosts of past expectations lingered on the fringes of her mind, testing her resolve. Created by comfort, trapped by convention. The phrase echoed in her thoughts as she flipped her notebook closed, the paper warm beneath her fingers. Would responding to her editor's request pull her further into a mire of doubt, or offer a pathway to reshape her narrative? She couldn't ignore it. This was the tension of a possible inflection point, her opportunity to reclaim agency over her voice while ensuring she didn't fall back into old patterns. Breathing deeply, she set down her coffee, opened a blank message, and began to type. "Thanks for reaching out. I'm in the middle of reevaluating my direction and goals, but I'd love to discuss the piece and any thoughts you have." The act of typing felt empowering, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she reclaimed her narrative. In that moment, Sarah realized that engaging with her past didn't mean shackling herself to it. Instead, perhaps she could find a way to weave her old work into her burgeoning identity, creating a tapestry that acknowledged every thread of her journey thus far. Once she hit send, a blend of relief and uncertainty flooded her. It felt good. The act alone was a small victory, a reminder that she not only had a voice but that it could adapt and grow, just as she was. But as she leaned back against her couch, surveying the chaos of her surroundings, a wave of determination washed over her. She was no longer willing to let the clutter of her physical space reflect the turmoil in her heart. "It's time to take action," she murmured to herself. The dishes in the sink suddenly seemed less daunting, more like a series of tasks begging to be accomplished. She rolled up her sleeves, diving into the work of transforming her physical space as a metaphor for reclaiming her internal one. Each dish cleaned, each piece of laundry folded, felt like shedding weights she no longer needed to carry. With the kitchen now sparkling and the living room visibly tidied, Sarah paused to reflect. Her efforts went beyond mere cleanliness. It was a reordering of priorities. Imagining fresh designs and projects filled her with excitement, displaying the very essence of her aspirations, vibrant, creative, alive. The thought of integrating Tom into this new chapter continued to simmer in her mind, but now it felt less like a burden and more like an opportunity for dialogue. She wanted to share her vision with him, a vision where both of their dreams could coexist. Once the house was in shape, she sought out Tom, who was still in a cozy cocoon of warmth under a blanket, deeply absorbed in a game on his tablet. Sarah sat beside him, the warmth of the moment igniting the bond that would be pivotal in her journey. "Hey buddy, can we chat for a minute?" she asked, her voice steady. Tom paused his game, glancing curiously at her. "Is everything okay?" "Absolutely," she smiled, taking a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do going forward and how that affects both of us." As she articulated her dreams, the redesigning of her career, and the layers of what it meant to be both a mother and a professional, the look on Tom's face shifted from curiosity to concern, and finally settled into a smiling affirmation of support. It was a revelation that he could understand her journey. They could navigate this change together. However, as the conversation flourished, a familiar tension returned, the precarious weight of uncertainty at the edges of her newfound clarity. Was she ready to make drastic changes to their comfort zone? The thought lingered like a storm cloud overhead. "I think we can do this," she said gently, sensing the need to buoy their spirits, yet apprehensions loomed just beneath. As she connected deeper with Tom, she was struck by the realization that these discussions must continue to unfold. But even stronger was the realization that embracing her newfound identity meant also confronting the fear nestled at the core of her aspirations. What if she stumbled? What if the leap didn't pan out as she had hoped? Tonight, she plans to end this day focused on momentum. There was a shift in her mind, a potential for joy and fulfillment, but also a reminder that the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles and self-discovery. With a final glance at the directory of potential jobs she had opened on her phone, she hesitated. Would she grasp this chance to pursue the creative life she envisioned, or allow her insecurities to keep her from taking that plunge? With a mix of trepidation and determination, she wondered, was the time right to leap into her new reality? The following morning, the golden light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting stripes across Sarah's freshly tidied living room. She woke with a sense of determination, but also an undeniable weight of dread settled in her chest. Today she would face a pivotal decision about the job opportunities she'd been contemplating. A subtle tremor of doubt echoed within her, reminiscent of old insecurities she thought she had shed. As she brewed coffee, each drip echoed her inner turmoil. She could still feel the warmth of yesterday's moment with Tom, their discussion a mixture of hope and apprehension intertwining in the air, but the possibility of failure loomed large. What would she do if she faltered in this leap? Would she truly risk her stability for the daunting prospect of pursuing her passion? Taking a sip of the steaming liquid, she flipped through her notebook, filled with half-formed ideas and sketches, visions of her career that seemed both exhilarating and destabilizing. The editor's request lingered in her mind, a reminder of the intoxicating possibilities that lay just outside her comfort zone. Gripping the pen tightly, she reiterated the foundational thoughts circulating in her mind. What did she want? Not just for herself, but for Tom too. Adjusting to a new dynamic was essential. They deserved a life rich in possibility, but was she equipped to guide them there? With a rush of clarity, Sarah resolved to pen a new entry in her journal. She needed to unravel these thoughts, to confront the raw and often unmentioned undercurrents of her aspirations. Today I will write my vision. She scrawled the words across the page. Not just career-driven, but a roadmap for the life I want for us. As she wore her entrepreneurial hat, thoughts spilled out like confetti, realistic job targets alongside a fervent desire to ensure financial stability. With each stroke of her pen, she shaped a blueprint of her potential success, igniting a flicker of excitement that temporarily quelled her fears. Later, while Tom was at school, Sarah sat at her desk staring at her laptop. It was daunting to think of reaching out to potential employers, to unveil her newfound desire, and yet, wasn't that the whole point? She had to navigate the unknown to find her place, to truly step out of the shadows and embrace the light. Deep breaths stirred her resolve. She committed to sending tailored applications for the positions she felt excited about. Tugging on the threads of her previous experience while weaving in her evolving narrative, she crafted emails that felt both genuine and hopeful. As she pressed send for the last one, an exhilarating thrill coursed through her, a powerful reminder that she was taking control. The dread that had once loomed felt lighter now, diffused by a stronger sense of purpose. But as the day wore on, the fear returned, not entirely dispelled. The phone buzzed with emails, responses that ranged from polite declines to engaging questions about her past experiences. As it unfolded, Sarah's heart raced with a frenetic mix of anticipation and trepidation. With every rejection, remnants of doubt flickered to life, whispering that maybe she hadn't changed after all. But deep down, she recognized a growing resilience as she confronted these truths. No one ever achieved success without facing adversity. She could feel small seeds of self-belief rooting themselves in her heart. Later that evening, seated beside Tom on the couch, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The conversations they had about her journey mattered, but she also knew vulnerability could be a source of connection. The moment filled her with a renewed purpose. She was not just the writer without a path, but a parent, a seeker of dreams. Undoubtedly, the road ahead remained tumultuous, but the thought of embarking on a journey with Tom engulfed her in hope. What if she took it a step further, making her aspirations a shared narrative with Tom? It could be a collaborative adventure, building a life of creativity instead of turning inward out of fear. As the house settled into silence, she resolved to approach their next chat with that intent, to carve out a shared vision, reassuring both of them they were capable of achieving a life less ordinary. But the real question remained unaddressed. Were they both truly ready to jump into an unknown future together? Or would the transparent discussions push them back into the shadows of their comfort zone? Tomorrow would bring clarity, but for tonight, a storm of possibilities swirled in her mind. Would she dare to break through the surface and transform her dream into a vibrant reality? The next day dawned with the promise of new beginnings, yet Sarah felt the familiar churn of anxiety in her stomach. The morning light, once a beacon of hope, now seemed to illuminate the fractures in her resolve. Did she have the strength to face the uncertain path ahead, especially with Tom's future entwined with her decisions? After dropping Tom off at school, she returned home, determined to execute the second part of her plan, to transform her aspirations into something tangible during their evening conversation. She craved a fortress built on shared dreams rather than solitary fears, yet the prospect of vulnerability still sent shivers down her spine. Sitting at her desk, a sanctuary of sorts, Sarah reviewed the research she'd conducted over the last few days on the companies that had shown interest in her applications. Each page brimmed with potential, but this newfound knowledge was clouded by the echoes of her own self-doubt. Could she adapt her experiences into a form that would resonate with them? Would they really see her as a valuable asset, or merely as someone attempting to reclaim lost ground? The clock ticked audibly, a reminder that time was finite. She had to act with intention. As she immersed herself in her notes, her mind fluttered back to a pivotal moment in college, when she delivered a presentation on community engagement. It was one of the few times she felt alive, exuding passion and certainty. She remembered the rush of adrenaline, confronting her fears head-on, and for a fleeting instant, she believed she could harness that same energy today. Rallying her thoughts, Sarah closed her notebook and took a deep breath. The mini epiphanies were reassuring, but she knew she had to take concrete steps. She decided to practice discussing her aspirations out loud, envisioning the moment she'd share her vision with Tom later that evening. This exercise felt empowering, like tuning up an engine that had been idle for too long. It would not only help her articulate her journey but also serve as practice for confronting their collaborative challenge. The afternoon wound down, but instead of the familiar heaviness of engaging in such a significant conversation, Sarah felt a flicker of enthusiasm blend with her anxiety. The time with Tom could lay the groundwork for something transformative, not only for her career, but for their familial bond. It dawned on her that their discussion could foster a sense of ownership over their dreams, allowing Tom to feel a stake in the direction of their lives. When Tom returned home, there was no denying the eagerness in his eyes. She remembered how he had looked at her, searching for an anchor in her uncertainty. "What did you accomplish today?" he asked, his voice brimming with youthful hope. Taking his hand, Sarah led him to the living room where they could settle. "Let's talk about our dreams," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I want us to create a future together, a future rooted in purpose." Tom's eyes lit up, and for a moment the possibility felt tangible. They drafted a list of aspirations, both big and small, infusing laughter and candid moments into the process. It was exhilarating, a dance of ideas that spun from career aspirations to personal goals, lifting them above their previous doubts. Yet as they navigated through their responses, Sarah sensed an unspoken truth hiding beneath the joy. What if the realities of their dreams collided? What if the weight of expectations quelled their enthusiasm, compelling them to retreat to safety? The shadows loomed larger as she articulated the risks, financial uncertainty, potential failures, the elusive balance of life and ambition. Once they wrapped up, she gazed at Tom, who seemed enraptured but wholly unaware of the complexity that lay ahead. "This is just the beginning," she stated with a smile, even as the depths of her uncertainty gnawed at her. Was she truly guiding them into a realm of boundless possibilities, or unknowingly leading them into a quagmire of tangled expectations? As night fell and they settled into their routine, Sarah felt heavier than before. The exhilarating potential of their conversation weighted by the looming reality that they might not be ready for the leap she had envisioned. Tomorrow would demand courage, both to face her own fears and to challenge the potential limitations of their dreams. With a heart full of possibility, but an anxious knot twisting within, she asked herself, What happens when hope collides with the unsparing truths of life? The dawn of a new day brought both a sense of urgency and reflection for Sarah. She stared out the window, watching the sun inch higher into the sky, illuminating the world outside her sanctuary. Today was a blank canvas, but the weight of her aspirations pressed against her chest like a leaden shroud. She needed to seize the momentum generated from her conversation with Tom and bring it into the practical realm of her life. The first step was to begin actually applying for jobs. She'd spent so much time planning, but now it was essential to confront the reality of rejection and disappointment that could come with it. She set her sights on 3 companies she had researched and felt aligned with her newly articulated goals. Each application would serve as an echo of the dream she had shared with Tom, a manifestation of their collaborative hope. Sitting at her desk, she methodically crafted her cover letters. Each word felt like a declaration of intent, a promise to herself and Tom that she was serious about changing their fortunes. It was daunting, but the memory of their shared laughter from the previous evening pushed her forward. Yet with each keystroke, doubt crept in. What if they found out about her breaks in employment? What if her gaps rendered her unqualified? Questions spiraled in her mind, and she had to physically shake them off. She took a deep breath, recalling the passion she had felt when presenting in college. Perhaps delivering her story to prospective employers could also ignite that spark. After submitting the first application, a small thrill surged within her. It felt like a dent in the wall of her fears. After several more submissions, Sarah's pace quickened. She began to run through the self-recriminations. Why had she waited so long? Could she have done this sooner? Here, in this moment, the weight of her past felt suffocating. Realizing she needed a break, Sarah stood up and paced the room, her thoughts bouncing between excitement and panic. She didn't want to backpedal into her old routine. She simply couldn't afford to falter now. The timing of Tom's school return interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She quickly shoved her papers aside, putting on a smile that felt just a touch forced. But as his innocent presence filled the room, a wave of responsibility washed over her. A reminder she was doing this for him, too. "Mom, can we talk about our dreams again?" Tom asked, his face aglow with youthful enthusiasm. With his question, Sarah felt a delicate balance in her heart. Here was a chance to not just share her dreams, but to involve him actively in their unfolding, granting him a role in their journey. "Yes, let's," she said, feeling her heart tap into the hopeful energy of their previous discussion. They began discussing practical steps to reach their dreams. Sarah encouraged Tom to think about what he wanted to achieve, and in turn, he posed questions about her ambitions. It was a stimulating exchange, punctuated with creativity and warmth. Yet despite the excitement simmering between them, Sarah couldn't escape the gnawing worry at the back of her mind. Could she deliver on these dreams? When she tucked Tom in later that night, his calm and contented breathing fueled a sense of determination within Sarah. She leaned against the doorframe, soaking in the moment. But the nagging thought returned. What if she failed to provide a stable foundation for their aspirations? As she retreated to her own solitude, doubts transformed into what-if scenarios that threatened to overpower her progress. She resolved to remain steadfast, yet the deeper consequences of her choices loomed large. That night, as she brainstormed further ideas in her head, a thought struck her with a chilling clarity. It was no longer just about her resurrection. They were a team with intertwined fates. And if she stumbled, it wouldn't just be her dream at stake, but also Tom's awakening hope. Facing a future of uncertainty, Sarah's resolve solidified into a burning question. What happens when the stakes rise beyond her own dreams? Tomorrow change loomed on the horizon, and she knew she had to confront something larger than herself. Her ultimate test lay ahead. Would she find the voice to lead, or would fear silence her? The sun rose with an overwhelming brightness, streaming through Sarah's window and illuminating the chaos of her thoughts. She sat at her desk, the night's introspection still looming over her. Each of her applications had been sent into the void, but the anticipation had morphed into a suffocating anxiety. She recognized that these actions were a crucial step, yet a pit of dread nestled deep in her gut. Confidence, as she had learned, was a fragile thing. It was part of the reason she had delayed this moment for so long. Self-doubt shrouded her like a fog that saw no end. Today, however, Sarah resolved to break through that haze. She imagined her past self, the one who had once stood confidently in front of a classroom, commanding attention during her presentations. That version of her sparked something, a flicker of determination burning amid her tangled anxieties. Eliminating distractions, she turned on her laptop again. It was time to revisit her dream. Sitting up straighter, she opened a blank document and began to draft a personal project. A blog sharing her journey and the lessons learned as a single mother navigating professional landscapes. As the words flowed, she crafted her narrative with impressive fluidity that surprised even her. Each keystroke felt liberating, as if unearthing a buried treasure of thoughts and feelings. But she paused. What if no one ever read it? Would it even matter? The haunting fears of invisibility clawed at her, reminding her of the years spent in the shadows, avoiding the spotlight. Yet, that inner voice she had begun to hone kept pushing her to respond. This was about more than validation. It was an assertion of her existence and a testament to her evolution. She focused on the story behind her aspirations, weaving in the complexities of motherhood and resilience, acknowledging the struggles that had led to gaps in her career. Vulnerability felt like a risk, but it also was her greatest strength. If she could articulate her truth, perhaps she would inspire others and in turn solidify her own resolve. In the midst of her writing, a notification pinged on her phone. An email alert. It was from one of her job applications. With trembling fingers, she opened it, her breath hitching in her throat. She had imagined this moment numerous times, each scenario ranging from acceptance to harsh rejection. The reality, however, presented a third option, a request for an interview. Elated, a swell of confidence surged through her. This was a spark igniting the dry kindling of hope. Yet beneath the excitement, apprehension lurked. The prospect of an interview raised the stakes exponentially, turning her thoughts back to her gaps in employment and the uncertainty of her skills. What if her past inadequacies caught up with her during the conversation? Determined to prepare, Sarah started researching the company, gathering information to anticipate questions, deciding how to frame her story. The day turned into a whirlwind of energy and purpose. Her anxiety slowly transformed into a plan. She made a detailed checklist, outlining her strengths, crafting responses to common questions, and even rehearsing soft skills that had once seemed distant memories. Yet doubt lingered like a shadow, whispering incessantly that her preparation could never be enough. As the day closed, fatigue settled in her bones, but satisfaction hung heavily on her heart. For the first time in years, she felt like a participant in her life rather than an observer. Tomorrow would present challenges anew, but those challenges now felt charged with potential. Just as she was about to close her laptop, Tom entered the room, eyes wide with anticipation about what she had worked on. "Are you going to be okay, Mom?" he asked, sensing her emotional upheaval. His innocent question pierced her thoughts, triggering deeper introspection. Sarah smiled, a flicker of confidence returning as she recalled her resolve. "I'm going to give it my best shot," she replied, determination threading through her voice. As she watched him bounce back to his room, she thought, what if, for once, the voice of self-doubt was drowned out by the thrilling prospect of change? What if she allowed herself to trust the journey they had embarked upon together? In that moment, she made a silent vow to embrace whatever came next. Facing the interview, her opportunity to articulate her story loomed ahead, and she understood that the true test extended beyond her dream. It was about embodying the strength she had cultivated. As she prepared for bed, the weight of uncertainty still loomed overhead, but an unmistakable sense of purpose coursed through her veins. What if tomorrow's interview instead turned into a platform for her story? What if this led to not only new beginnings for her, but for Tom too? The rise and fall of her heartbeat echoed the looming possibility of transformation, one that could ripple far beyond her own ambitions. The morning arrived cloaked in an electric tension, the air crackling with unspoken possibilities. As Sarah prepared for the interview, Her reflection in the bathroom mirror reflected more than anxious nerves. It revealed a fierce determination to redefine her narrative. Each stroke of her brush through her hair was a reminder of the liberation she had begun to harness. Dressed in her light blue blazer, a color that reminded her of crystal-clear skies, she felt a subtle transformation. The fabric, soft yet structured, seemed to embrace her newfound resolve. Yet the deeper she delved into the details of her outfit, the louder the self-doubt whispered in the back of her mind. She couldn't help but question whether the ensemble truly fit the part she intended to play. As she descended the stairs, Tom's excited chatter filled the space. He had made breakfast, a colorful array of fruits and toast, and it struck her that in nurturing him, she was inadvertently nurturing herself. Each small moment of support from him fostered a sense of purpose she once thought was lost. "Mom, you look like a superhero," he proclaimed, eyes wide as he practically bounced on his toes. His earnest admiration briefly lifted the weight pressing down on her chest. "Thanks, buddy," she replied, heart swelling. "I just need to do my best today." "Are you ready?" he asked, tilting his head with curiosity. Vulnerability crept back into her mind, but she pushed it aside. "I will be, Tom," she declared, swallowing hard. "I just have to believe in what I've done." As she drove to the interview, the world outside her window blurred into a series of fleeting images. Old structures intermingling with new developments, shadows of past failures blending with the luminescence of potential. The journey was symbolic, a reflection of the road she traversed both physically and emotionally. Yet, as she approached the office building, unease settled into her gut. The towering structure loomed above her like a giant, and its presence starkly reminded her of the corporate hierarchy she had avoided. Arriving at the reception, Sarah realized she was on the edge of a precipice, the vast unknown lying just beyond the door marked "Interview." She could turn back. Retreating felt safer, a lure of familiarity nearly palpable. But she took a steadying breath, remembering Tom's belief in her, and followed the receptionist to the interview room. Inside, 3 faces looked up expectantly, a panel of seasoned professionals whose expressions seemed intimating, yet not unfriendly. Shaking hands in the modern conference room, Sarah felt emotionally exposed, standing before them like a sponge, soaking in their energy. This was her moment, but it also felt like staring into an abyss of judgment. The first question knocked into her like a jolt. "Can you tell us about your professional journey?" In that instant, a wave of authenticity washed over her. She shared her story, not simply about the gaps in her career or the chaos of single motherhood. Rather, she framed her experiences as building blocks, each struggle leading to her resilience. It was liberating to speak her truth, and as she did, the room's energy shifted subtly. The panel leaned in, their expressions unfurling into interest as she breathed life into her narrative. Suddenly, Sarah realized that articulating her challenges opened a path toward shared understanding. Questions began flowing, testing her comprehension of industry trends and decision-making. Each reply transformed her initial dread into exhilaration. With every answer, she caught glimpses of acknowledgement from the panel, shimmering reflections signaling that her experiences were valued. However, as the interview concluded, a critical question remained lodged in her mind. Had she presented enough of herself? The lingering self-doubt threatened to crystallize, but just before she stepped out, one of the panelists looked her in the eye, a hint of admiration underscoring his tone. "Thank you for sharing your journey, Sarah. It takes courage." She collected her belongings, heart racing with an odd mix of triumph and uncertainty. The exit felt bittersweet, leaving a lingering question. Had she truly laid her soul bare, or were there still parts of her story she hesitated to explore? As she sat in her car, her thoughts began to churn, and an unsettling realization dawned on her. In seeking to redefine her identity through an interview, she faced an unsettling truth. Embracing her past wasn't just about telling a compelling story. It was integral to embracing who she could become. What if reclaiming her story was merely the beginning? The prospect of further inner work awaited her beyond the interview's surface, and she knew that undertaking this journey would bring challenges that would again test her resolve. With this revelation simmering in her mind, Sarah turned the key in the ignition. setting off down a road with new opportunities. But as she drove away, one critical question hung heavy in her psyche. How much more of her own narrative was she prepared to confront in the days ahead? The clouds that had hovered in Sarah's mind began to dissipate as time passed. Days turned into weeks, and the anxious flutter from her interview transformed into a rhythm of anticipation as she awaited responses from potential employers. Each time her phone chimed, her heart raced, and each notification became both a beacon of hope and a trigger for doubt. Yet beneath this uncertainty, there was an undeniable shift. Sarah took a deep breath and reminded herself, transformation is rooted in resilience. She had committed to growing, both for her own sake and for Tom's future. It was time to embrace every step along the way, rather than letting the weight of her past stifle the momentum she had begun to build. One morning, as the sun streamed through her window, illuminating the fresh sprigs of a potted plant on her desk, Sarah picked up her notebook and began to write. This wasn't just about applying for jobs anymore. It was about establishing a firm foundation for both her and Tom's dreams. The chapter of uncertainty began to close, replaced by clearer aspirations. With renewed clarity, her first actions were to actively engage in self-care. She began daily routines, a morning walk, an extra effort at home-cooked meals, and a commitment to sharing a reading ritual with Tom before bed. Each of these seemingly simple acts began to contribute to an emotional clarity she hadn't recognized she was craving. As they navigated through their evenings, Sarah and Tom often returned to that shared list of aspirations they had created. They established a family meeting each week, during which they discussed short-term goals, successes of the past week, and aspirations for the future. The pursuit of alignment between their individual dreams turned into a collaborative adventure. Tom's enthusiasm for their goals ignited something within Sarah, an understanding that dreams could be built on a house of cards, strong yet delicate, with each card serving as a commitment to support one another. It became a family ethos defined by open communication and shared purpose. Then one afternoon, as she sat sipping tea at her kitchen table, an email notification bustled in. Congratulations, you've been selected for a second interview. Elation surged through her veins like electricity. This wasn't just any interview, it represented the validation of her efforts, a testament to the foundational work she had put in since the night she first scribbled down goals. Within the next few days, Sarah prepared with a focused intensity for this interview. She crafted additional thoughts for the questions she anticipated. Each moment felt infused with purpose. Even her vulnerability became her strength. She recognized her journey as one marked by both struggles and successes, and it was these dualities that made her a unique candidate for the role. On the day of the interview, she adorned herself in her light blue blazer once again, a reminder of how far she had come and what she was ready to achieve. As she entered the office for this pivotal conversation, the nerves that had once toppled her confidence were met with excitement and determination. The panel welcomed her warmly, and as she took her seat behind the polished conference table, the previous feelings of intimidation and fear transformed into a quiet assurance. The questions flowed, and Sarah articulated the lessons learned through her journey, intertwining her aspirations with her worth. Success means resilience, she declared, feeling a lightness as the words left her lips. It's not just about arriving at a destination, but what you learn along the way, and I have learned so much about myself and my abilities. At the conclusion of the interview, a panelist smiled at her, reflecting genuine interest. We appreciate your honesty and perspective. Thank you for sharing your vision with us today. For the first time, Sarah believed she was presenting an authentic version of herself, the professional she had aspired to be. Days later, as Sarah curled up on the couch late that night with Tom by her side, feeling exhausted yet at peace, her phone buzzed again. The email from the company arrived, and as she read, her eyes widened. The words, "We would like to offer you the position," leaped off the screen, and the reality of her accomplishment sank in. Tears brimming with joy filled her eyes. In that moment, everything she had visualized coalesced into reality. Every struggle, every effort, every moment that had previously felt like a weight, now lifted into the air like confetti. Her pathway toward healing had been forged not just through achieving a job, but also through transforming herself into a mother who faced fears, nurtured dreams, and embraced vulnerability as a form of strength. She turned to Tom, a rush of gratitude swelling warm in her heart. "We did it," she exclaimed, their bond of honesty illuminated with deep satisfaction. Their journey of transformation was not solely rooted in an individual achievement. It had become a shared triumph, shaping both their futures. As they high-fived in celebration, Sarah felt the emotional weight lift entirely, anchoring her newfound identity with solid confidence. In the days that followed, Sarah dove headfirst into her new role with palpable enthusiasm, embroidering her experiences into her work and crafting relationships marked by authenticity. She relished the balancing act of her new job while simultaneously embracing the joyful moments at home with Tom. She had come full circle, emerging from a place of uncertainty into clarity, not just professionally but personally as well. The voice of self-doubt that had shadowed her for so long now receded to the background, replaced by a strong chorus of self-belief and accomplishment. As Sarah lay in bed each night, she would smile, reflecting on how far she had traveled on this path of transformation. Her fears had morphed into the very building blocks of her identity, offering her a greater sense of purpose. It was not just about surviving anymore. This was thriving, and Sarah understood now that she truly had the competence to embrace the vivid tapestry of her life, one confidently crafted step at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but the weight of possibility, joyous and resolute, coupled with her vibrant dreams, lay waiting in the horizon. Now is the moment for you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. You need to support this journey. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. You deserve to be heard. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. True fans of personal overcoming stories know the importance of supporting this channel through your actions.